ahimsa, if I can just look at it first towards myself, can I be non-violent towards myself? Can I be non-violent, say, in my language, in my words? Or maybe I can just start being non-violent in my thoughts. Maybe words might be too difficult. I'm used to a certain way of talking and I feel that people around me are so aggressive. So start small, micro steps.
Hi, Anubha. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Deepak. Thank you so much for having me over.
How are you?
I'm doing good. It's pretty cold in Delhi, but
It
apart
is,
from that, all well.
and foggy, as the newspapers
Yes.
say. So, Anubha, this podcast, we discussed it before, but what we would like to do is sort of understand what is yoga beyond asanas. And I am not from a yoga background, neither philosophy nor on the exercise fitness regime kind of stuff. But the general mindset of people remains that right, yoga is a fitness session, and it can be as deep and as intensive as you want it to be. So some things which we'll delve into in this session is try to understand the philosophical aspects, and also try to understand the origin of yoga, what it was meant to be, how it has changed across the millennia and stuff. But before we go into all of that, can you give a quick brief intro on who Anubha is and what has been your own yoga journey?
That's a very interesting question. Thank you, Deepak. Who Anubha is, I think, is constantly changing. I am learning more about myself, and I personally feel that's how it should be. You should be constantly evolving as a human being. So to give you a background, I grew up in a small town in Dehradun, and then I shifted to Delhi for my education. I worked as an HR professional in Bangalore as well as in Gurgaon itself. And I was introduced to yoga in school, uh, as it was part of our extracurricular activities. But I, maybe as a youngster, did not find it attractive enough, or it did not speak to me then. But after I got married, I got introduced to yoga again, and I started my yoga journey, with my teacher Navteej Johar. And I feel that he's a large part of my yoga journey, because the style of teaching and the style of imparting yoga, while it was of course asana practice that we did, it was a very freeing, a very liberating kind of a yoga practice, where it was, I feel, tailored to suit, an individual physical requirements and stages. And so I found that extremely freeing and non-violent, if I may say so. Um, and I started my asana practice along with my corporate journey, and I saw the effects of yoga on my personal as well as professional life. Um, and over the years, I was drawn more towards yoga, and I realized that this is something that I wanted to know more about, invest myself more in, and maybe pick this up, maybe as a professional in terms of a teacher. And that's when, like, I quit my corporate job of 13 years and did my formal international yoga teachers training from Krishnamacharya Yoga Mandiram, Chennai. And this was during the COVID years. So I quit my job in 2019, and 2020 was when the batch was supposed to be starting. So I do see it as a blessing in disguise, because during the COVID years, the most difficult years, I jumped into learning yoga, via my course, and it was a very enriching and fulfilling experience. And I've completed my teachers training. It was an 800-hour program, which spread over for almost 1.5 to 2 years. Because of COVID, it was extended further. Yeah, and I'm teaching, and I also continue to learn. What we probably will also be talking in, I taken heavily from the Yoga Sutras. That's the philosophy of yoga that I've really kind of learned, and which appeals to me. So, yeah, a fairly long answer to your short question. This is who I am, and this has been my yoga journey so far.
So a few things out of that, Anubha. One is you mentioned you started with your first teacher Navtej. Uh, what tradition was that? Was it the usual generic one? And another small point you mentioned or a word you used there was non-violent. I'm curious to understand how that particular word figured right at the beginning of your journey and what you mean by it.
Right. So, yes, so I studied under Navtej, who is a student of Sri Desikachar, and this is the same tradition as the KYM tradition. And it's a very, yeah, it's a very different, which I found, if I was to, talk about myself, I found it a very different style of teaching where the focus was the individual. And in my personal experience, I have found certain yoga classes to be violent. And coming to your question on what do I mean by violence, I think there is a lot of violence towards the body as well as the mind, where it is predetermined that a posture has to look a certain way. So,
Hmm.
let's say if I was to give you an example of Uttanasanam, which is a forward bend, right? So, if you think of Uttanasanam, a perfect posture is your knees are straight, your spine is nicely curved, your hands are placed, flat on the floor. But, how many of us are there at that level of flexibility? And hence, by just modifying the posture a little bit, I feel we bring in the element of non-violence, and this is,
Hmm.
um, it makes it easier, and it basically respects the individual, that we are starting at the individual starting point and not at where the teacher is, right? A teacher has been practicing for so many years, but a student may be, and as I said, in my journey I was a corporate person who would be sitting for 12 hours a day, 13 hours a day. And so of course my body was not as flexible to do a perfect forward bend. And the violence comes in when you tell a person that they have to do a posture in a set manner and the person is unable to do it. And so there's a violence towards the body where they push themselves and it could lead to injury, or even a mental violence where they're struggling and there's a lot of turmoil inside, that, oh, why am I not able to do a posture in a particular way of how it is to be done. And
Hmm.
honestly, I feel it's just this, we our obsession with this whole perfectionism around how a posture needs to look is something which is quite defeating the purpose of why we are doing asana.
Yeah, interesting. I mean, you almost defined non-violence as acceptance.
Right.
So, acceptance of where you are in your journey, acceptance of your body, and then integrating that as your yogic practice. But it seems it would be beneficial if we defined yoga precisely at this point. So, what does yoga mean to you?
For me, Deepak, if I was to say what yoga means to me is transformation, right? Like I spoke about a starting point. I am at a starting point, or I was at a starting point of my yoga journey when I started it around some 20 years back. And I have seen the transformation physically. I have seen more transformation emotionally and mentally. So for
Hmm.
me, yoga is transformation. If I was to borrow from the Yoga Sutra, the first sutra itself says it's a Anushasanam, right? Anushasanam, we sometimes interpret it as discipline, but what I have learned, and what was taught to me by my teachers is, Anushasanam is to follow, to experience. So yoga is a very personal experience. So it is something, but you have to experience it in your body and mind, and then that becomes yours. Otherwise, if a teacher
Hmm.
tells me this is what yoga is, and that's his truth, right? That's his journey. And I just take
Hmm.
on that truth, and that's not my truth. So yoga, Anushasanam itself means that it has to become your truth, and it only becomes your truth if you actually experience it, and experience it happens through practice. So yeah, so this is both from my perspective as well as the text perspective what yoga really is.
Yeah, no, interesting. I mean, it's a very mature definition of yoga, and maybe further on, I would like to explore whether you feel that this precise definition makes sense only at a particular age or only at a particular experience of life which you have had. But let's go into the core topic of today's episode, which is what is yoga beyond asanas, and I mean, how would you, if a beginner, let's say me, and come and ask you, so I mean, where does it start? What was the intention? What was the objective, both from a historical point of view, but also from a philosophical point of view, what exactly is happening here and what is the objective?
Yoga, there are, yoga is again going back to the Yoga Sutra. There are 8 limbs of yoga, right? And these are yama, which is basically your conduct towards the environment, niyama, conduct towards yourself. And again, within yama, niyama, you have 5 different, sub or categories rather. Yama, niyama, asana, which is of course our physical practice, pranayama, which is breathing techniques, pratyahara is withdrawal of the senses, right? Dharana, wherein there is a focus and concentration towards an object. Dhyana is where it is uninterrupted focus towards that object. And samadhi, if I was to say, that is the last stage, which is a stage of, kaivalyam, where your enlightenment happens, right? So these are the 8 limbs of yoga, which are prescribed in the Yoga Sutra as well.
And did all yoga flow from this 8-limb structure? Like all branches of yoga today have been derived from this structure?
So if you do talk about yoga, it involves these 8 limbs. But where, different schools may focus on different aspects, like some may focus only on asana, some may focus only on, pranayama, or have a mix of both, right? And so you see yoga across text also, like yoga is mentioned in the Gita as well, right? Yoga, different classifications of yoga, if I may say so. So yoga, like again, if I was to go to etymological term, it is basically, joining. It is basically, it's called union, but again, this union term or word can be misinterpreted, especially if you're talking from the perspective of Yoga Sutra. So I don't want to use the word union, but it is like, a yoking kind of, you're pulling through. So it's an effort, if I was to, in the right direction, if you were to look at the term yoga. And as I said, so there are these 8 limbs. Commentators typically do say that these are like ladders. So you start from yama, niyama, asana, and you graduate, right? However, and again, that's where, I find my school or my lineage very empowering, is because Sri Desikachar, who started this institute, said that you start from wherever you are, right? So it is not that because I am not a practitioner and I have not done asana, I have to start from yama, I have to start from ground zero. He said you start from wherever you are. And I think there was this belief that irrespective of wherever you start from, you will, somehow end up doing all these 8 limbs of yoga if you continue to practice, right? So that's one way of looking, at these 8 limbs. And asana, as I said, is the 3rd limb. Now, if we were to look at historically, in the times of, let's say, when the Yoga Sutra was compiled, or even after that, I think that there is a assumption that people are physically fit, people who are interested, because as I said, that the end goal is samadhi. So people who are on that path are already doing asana. And therefore, if you look at Yoga Sutra, there are only 3 sutras in the entire text, that are dedicated towards asana. So asana is important. We cannot say that, you should not waste your time doing asana. The whole idea of yoga is that I would say is incorrect. And the reason being that if your body is not healthy, and that is why asana comes before pranayama, is that to be able to sit through a breathing technique, or to then again sit through pratyahara or dharana, dhyana, which are like, you have to be seated in a particular place for a long time. You have to prepare your body, right? And if I was to again, I personally get very fascinated with, the roots of words, the etymology of words. So asana, so the word asana itself means to sit, right? Now, in today's terminology, we talk about asan, right? Which is a place on which we sit. So it is, if you look at it from a philosophical perspective, it is also the place where you stabilize your body to be able to then, do the further limbs of yoga. So I would say asana, of course, is important, because without a healthy body, you cannot do the rest of, the practices of yoga. But if I was to talk about the current stage, I think it has gone to the other extreme, where the entire focus is asana, where we've just picked up asana from these 8 limbs and forgotten, about where, yoga really started from. And I would not say that it's wrong to use yoga for physical fitness, because I think yoga has the ability, because personally for me, I started with asana practice, right? I personally believe that, doing a good, and by a good I mean, an asana practice which is, also working on the mind, also helping you to work, and basically go inwards, is what I would call a right yoga practice. I think that there is a huge potential for today's world, or the world that we live in today, where we have to start from the body to be able to then, access our mind, our thoughts, our emotions.
Yeah, no, I agree. So, one thing which came out is in these 8 steps which you mentioned. I think we find schools which emphasize. Obviously, we find schools which emphasize on asanas, but we also find schools who emphasize on your meditation aspect of it, your dhyana aspect, and also schools which emphasize on pranayama. But almost no one is putting stress on the yama and the niyama aspect of it. Why do you think that is? Is it too philosophical to make sense in today's world, or is it simply too abstract?
I personally, and again, I'm going to talk from my personal experiences. See, when you look at the yama niyama, right, they do seem a little daunting, right? So, for example, and that's where the word ahimsa or non-violence comes, is the first yama, right? Ahimsa, satya, aparigraha, right? So these terms seem very daunting, and the world that we're living in today, which is so transactional, where we have to, there's a cutthroat competition. So if I'm going to say, oh, I'm going to be honest, it seems a little mismatched at times, or it feels it's this basically made sense some thousands of years back, and it doesn't make sense today. But I think if we're able to just break these down, like as I said, ahimsa, if I can just look at it first towards myself, that, can I be non-violent towards myself? Can I be non-violent, let's say, in my language, in my words, right? Or maybe I can just start being non-violent in my thoughts. My, maybe words might be too difficult. I'm used to a certain way of talking, and I feel that people around me are so aggressive, so maybe I can't be non-violent. So maybe bring in, so start small, micro steps. I think that's where the big picture is missing, where people, I find, again, it's in my personal experience, teachers sometimes make these words so daunting, and it seems like, oh, ahimsa means that I have to be a pure vegetarian. I have to, be careful where I walk. I should not step on an insect. Of course, that is a later stage. That is cannot be my starting point if I am a daily, like a householder, and I think, and again, I come back to my lineage, is because yoga for a long time was restricted to the backgrounds to people who had, the sannyasis, people who had given away their household life. So coming to, householders, people like me or you who are, living with a family, these terms, which are the yama niyama, can seem very daunting, right? And they seem very Puritan also at times, and they're also I feel, made out to be such. I think if we can just keep it simple and, simplify it for an individual, as I say, and that's something that I've learned from my lineage, is start from the student's starting point, where you are today. So if you are at a level of, let's say, satya, or you are at a zero level of satya, where you cannot even probably tell yourself the truth. And for me, I think, if I can first personalize it, though, as I said, yama is my conduct to my environment, but I feel that it makes it easier for me if I can, distill it or break it down at my level, that can I be non-violent towards myself, right? Can I be true to myself? Can I look at really where I am and what I'm saying? Is it the truth?
Hmm.
And then maybe, gradually, because yoga is a journey, it is not a destination. So it is not that once you've come at a certain level, you're going to stay there. If you do not do the practice, you are going to slip back.
Hmm.
And you know again, and going taking it back to my lineage, yoga was, when, let's say, we were kids, or even when our parents were youngsters, yoga was something which, people who had taken sannyas, who had left the household and the worldly living, and were living in the jungles. Yoga was something that we had kind of confined to that.
Hmm.
And so how, why I was talking about my lineage is because Sri Krishnamacharya, he brought yoga to the householder. He practiced yoga as a householder. He brought it into the life and householders who could practice yoga along with living in the society, doing their jobs, doing their works. And I think that is the beauty of, what I have learned, which again comes back to, what is an individual starting point, is where the teacher should start from, and not talk about or things that have been written thousands of years back. How can we, I'm not saying distort it, that's not the idea, because these texts have survived because there is a truth in what they're saying. But can we start an individual from where the person is, give them the comfort that it is attainable? Because I feel today, if I was to talk about yama niyama, if I was to talk about honesty, truth, or let's say santosh, or swadhyay, which is self practice, um, people would run away and they'd be like, sorry, I don't know, I have to live in the world and this is not meant for me. So
Hmm.
can we, bring it to their level, make it, break it down for them,
Hmm.
is how I would look at this.
Yeah, I mean, I could probably make, I mean, in my perspective, I think we can make a case both ways. And I completely agree with you that one of the responsibilities of the teacher is to come down to the level of the student, because you have to guide them. The cliff cannot be too far away. But uh, again, coming from a slightly different tradition, uh, and even having some insights or some training in Buddhism, one thing which I feel is that these initial yama and niyama are precisely the way we behave in the world, right? So all of your asanas are individual, as you say, as you mentioned. Your dhyana, your samadhi is individual, and all of them remain individual for you where you are. But how we behave in this world, which is why, right, a lot of students might be saying that, okay, this is not practical today. But technically, how you behave in the world is the most important aspect, because if you want to go out and achieve something, if you want to, as a yoga teacher, you want your studio to impact many lives, or right, as a business person, you want to grow big, you have ambitions, and all of them are absolutely valid in today's day and age. But how do you achieve them? Now, there are two ways to do it. One, you can say that, okay, let me be very clear in the practices I do, but in the way I behave in the world, let that be a separate aspect of the life, because a lot of the age old rules don't apply. The second aspect is that however small, however minute, there has to be a connection between what I do in the world and what I'm doing for myself. And and again, this is coming from a little bit of my own experience, that when we talk of things, so for example, you mentioned santosh or you mentioned satya, right? And a lot of people, the first reaction is, doesn't work, right? This doesn't mean anything in this world. Um, and so the best practitioners whom I have seen, and it might completely be valid what you're saying, that once they've gone through these asanas and dhyana, and then they can come back to yama and niyama, it cannot be the starting point. Yet the best practitioners I have seen have eventually come to the realization that this is a very crucial, if not the more important part. So I simply cannot be meditating for half an hour on my mat, and then for 23 and a half hours remaining, I am interacting precisely as I was before I started my practice. So there is a, and which is why I was curious that why don't more teachers So I can understand why they don't emphasize puritanical or right those kind of words. But one of the responsibility of teachers might also be to sort of make it more applicable, right, and also to underline the importance of these aspects. But another thought which I was, I mean, as you were saying, was that it's probably slightly easier. And we have seen the cases of many gurus in various traditions and their fall from grace, right, when scandals hit and stuff. So even in the real world, it seems to be easier to, right, demonstrate flexibility in asanas than it is to demonstrate your complete control on your acharan. So it's a quite a tricky topic, but I would assume that I think it's a mixture of what you said, that the teacher has to be cognizant of the starting point of the students, but as well keep in mind that eventually, could be tomorrow, could be 2 years later, how they behave in the world will probably have more impact on their own happiness or their own destination, which I think we'll talk about, of the destination of yoga. So I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I totally agree with you. And at no point am I saying that you can move, even forget meditation, but even pratyahara, which is basically, withdrawal of senses, cannot happen without the yama niyamas,
Mm.
right? Because see, the yama niyamas, as I said, that, yama is my conduct in the world around me, right? In my environment. And niyama is what I do for myself, right? Which is soch, santosh, so cleanliness, santosh would be contentment. I'm happy with what I have, neither am I disturbed with what I don't have, right? So that state of mind is a prerequisite for me to be able to do a withdrawal of my senses, move to a meditation, then move to, dhyana and samadhi. Of course, you cannot, move ahead to those till you have the yama niyamas in your life. And I don't mean by having it 100%. As I said, you start gradually, because you cannot just say, okay, from today, I'm going to just tell the truth and nothing but the truth, right? And again, the text prescribes, like even something like a truth. I had this question for my teachers, do you always tell the truth? And, because that's a very interesting topic. What is, good and what is right, always be righteous. And so my teacher said that if you can't be kind while telling the truth, then don't tell the truth. Right? So these are not abstract terms that, you just pick them up and say, okay, from today, and therefore you need a teacher, right? A guru, and that is what a parampara is, because this is philosophy, this is a way of life. And I need a teacher to, guide me through this. So I totally agree with what you're saying. And another comment I would like to make is that, most of us live in this black and white frame. It is either this or this. Either you're a corporate person or you are, a non-violent, following yamas, niyamas person. You cannot be both. I don't believe that. I believe that it is not either or. It is this and this. I can be a corporate person and I can, be kind. I can, be happy, be content with what I have, right? Not covet what somebody else have, not get tempted with things around me. So, and I feel that's the essence of yoga, to be in that equanimity state where I'm not disturbed by what's going on around me. And I think, and, when you talk about teachers, and I have been very fortunate to, learn from amazing teachers. I have seen that. I have seen that humility. I have seen that, equanimity, the humbleness. And so I think, to kind of comment on what you said, I totally agree with you. But coming back, you cannot go beyond asana without, maybe you can start, the starting point can be asana, and you can do pranayama. And I feel that they may help you go back to yama niyama, because that has been my journey, that, the asana practice and the pranayama practice. And, coming back again to my lineage, why I found it very different from, other practices is my teacher, Navtej. I remember the first class, I was struggling because I was trying to do the perfect forward bend. And he was like, bend your knees. And, I was like, it took me a minute to kind of understand what he really was saying. And he said, bend your knees. The idea of this forward bend is not for your legs, right? So to know why we are doing a particular posture, right? What are we aiming at? So a forward bend is actually for the spine, right? And it's not for the legs. And so people, end up hurting their spine, in order to keep the legs straight. If I was just to again take the same example, and the purpose, what I learned for the first time is the breath. The breath is what we are trying to, get at. So if I, come back to, I think you'd asked me this question about, my lineage, and probably, what attracted me to this school was that it's the body, breath, and mind. So these three are the components of a asana practice. And a lot of schools, as you said, they do focus on the body and the breath, but very few schools bring in asana and the breath together. And my lineage is one where I have learned how to bring in, to keep breath as the primary component. And we'll probably talk about it, how that ties into the philosophy of yoga, is why the breath is so important when we are doing an asana practice. And I feel like that is the reason why it has, or it has the potential to lead to a transformation of what I've been talking about.
Yeah, no. So I mean, I would love to move to the mind aspect of this journey, but on the philosophical aspect, so almost all Indian traditions have the eventual objective of moksha, right? So there is samsara and you're suffering, and then there is end to suffering, and right, the roads could be bhakti, they could be jnana, they could be something else. Uh, so where does yoga sort of merge into these objectives as well as the suffering and the cause of suffering? What does yogic philosophy have to say about it?
Right. So, as you rightly said, all philosophical text, all, texts talk about dukkha, or which is translated as suffering. But, dukkha, again, as I said, my fascination for words and their roots is du and ka. Ka means space, right? And du basically means it's a, prefix which has a negative connotation, right? So it's basically constriction of a space, right? So, and that's something that we experience, that when we are, suffering, or when we are upset, there is a constriction that happens in the body, in the mind, in the breath, right? So it just feels there's a tightness that we feel. So the Yoga Sutras talk about dukkha, and you know and so, like, I will just kind of deviate slightly and bring in Sankhya, because actually Sankhya is the philosophical text, and yoga picks up from Sankhya and goes into a more practical and a practice oriented text. So Sankhya gives you the platform, and then yoga builds on that and says, okay, now what do we do about it, and how do we build in practices to elevate this dukkha? So there are three dukkhas that are listed in Sankhya Karika. The first is Adhyatmika, Adhibhautika, and Adidevika. So Adhyatmika is suffering that is caused because of my own doing. Adibhautika is due to the external forces, which could be, volcanoes, earthquakes, etc. And Adidevika which is basically cosmic in nature, or supernatural causes, right? So these are the three types of dukkha. Now we come to the Yoga Sutra, which says that, why are these dukkhas there, right? There are essentially four reasons why these dukkhas exist. So these dukkhas are on account of parinama. Parinama is change, and as we know that, our lives are constantly changing from moment to moment. Tapa. So tapa is, intense attraction towards external things, right? Desires, cravings. Samskara, which is conditioning, right? My habits, my patterns, how I have been brought up, my environment has shaped me to be a particular type, right? So because of those, things can cause me suffering. And the last is the gunas. And this is again, the philosophy of yoga, which talks about the three gunas, the rajas, tamas, and sattva. So very briefly, rajas is basically activity which allows us, like, for example, I'm talking right now, you're listening. So, we are interacting. So this is the activity. And so rajas is what allows us. It's the guna that allows us to have these interactions. Tamas is the fact that we're sitting and talking to each other, so that stability. We have heaviness when we are sleepy. So the guna that actually allows us to sleep is tamas. Clarity, it is lightness. It is, the ability to understand things in a clear manner. So these are the three gunas, and these are constantly in a flux, at one point in time. So for example, right now, let's say if we were talking, rajas is highly active when we are talking right now. Let's say after we finish this podcast, I suddenly feel very fatigued and I need to lie down. So tamas is active. Let's say in the morning when I've done my yoga practice, sattva is predominant. So these gunas are constantly in a flux, and so this brings me suffering, right? So these, what Yoga Sutra says, that these, the constant changes around me, right? My samskaras, my habits, my patterns, my cravings, my desires, and these changing stages of the gunas is what causes me suffering in the world, right? And it again then further goes ahead and talks about what causes this dukkha. I've told you the reasons for it, but what really causes these dukkha is the yoga philosophy basically is a dualistic philosophy, right? It talks about the purusha and the prakriti, but I will probably not use these words because for people who are have not been introduced to the yoga philosophy may find it confusing. So let's just say that the yoga philosophy presumes that within us is a seer, right? And the seer is pure and it is clear, it has clarity. And what is seen? So what is seen is everything which is around me, right? And what is seen is also the mind, right? Because that's external. Purusha is the seer, and the mind, which we'll talk about, which is actually not the mind in the Western concept of mind, but it's called the chitta. We'll probably, after we finish this, we'll pick up talking about the chitta. That too is because that is helping me. It's like my senses, which actually bring in all the information inwards. So that is what is seen. So the Yoga Sutra says that the cause of this dukkha is because we forget that the seer is separate from the what is seen, drishta and drishti. These are two, and there's a samyoga. There is a union between these two, and they seem to like almost merge and become one. And because of that, because of the avidya, what we call again in the Yoga Sutra, is that this is incorrect knowledge that we have, that these two are actually one, and I am what I see. I am Anubha, like you asked me who I am, and I kind of attribute certain external qualities, that I'm a yoga teacher, I have studied yoga. So yes, that is part of who I am, but that's not who I am, right? So it is this avidya, or the incorrect knowledge that an individual has, which causes this dukkha. And so this is broadly what dukkha is, as per the yoga philosophy and the Sankhya philosophy, and the reasons and the causes of the dukkha.
So yoga you mentioned is a yogic philosophy is primarily a dualistic philosophy. And does it start as a dualistic philosophy and also end in duality, or in the end is there a merging?
No, it doesn't. So it starts as a dualistic philosophy. The merging doesn't happen. But very interestingly, one of the benefits of asana practice, so as I said, there are only 3 sutras that Patanjali lists for asana. And one of those sutra talks about asana is that the duality ceases to exist because of asana practice. That, and what it means really by duality is, see, everything in life is duality, right? There's dukkha, like we spoke about dukkha, and then we say sukha, right? There is I'm feeling cold, I'm feeling hot. So there are these dualities which are always conflicting, and that's what I probably meant, that, if I'm a santosha, then it means I'm not, living in the real world. So those dualities cease to exist because of asana practice. And of course, the yoga sutra ends, or the yoga philosophy, the end objective is for the seer to establish itself in its true form. And that's the sutra 2, tada drishtuhu swarupe avasthanam, that the drishta, or the seer, is able to establish itself in its true form. And of course, like talking about what true form is, that's the whole text basically covers that. So we will not, it'll take us, I think, at least a couple of sessions to cover all of that. But yes, it basically says that I am really able to see myself for who I am, and not for these, attachments that I have around my name, my designation, my status, my financial status, economic status. But I am beyond all of this. And I am pure, and I think that's what attracts the yoga philosophy to me, is that the Purusha, or the seer, is a true and a pure form. So, all of us have that potential inside us. I don't have to go, looking around it, but of course, I have to put in the practice to be able to, probably reach that stage of enlightenment.
And so you mentioned the second Yoga Sutra, and we'll probably move to the first one after this. But out of curiosity, does yoga mention any why? I mean, why is this happening, and why does Anubha have to go through these 8 stages before she realizes that as the seer she's pure?
The why this happens is why this identification happens because of avidya, and avidya is one of the primary kleshas. But before we move on to kleshas, I think we'll talk about the chitta. So let's talk about the so-called mind first before we understand, the vrittis and the kleshas. So the mind, as I said, is not the same mind as is, understood in the Western concept. So the mind has 3 entities as per Sankhya and as per the Yoga Sutra. And these are buddhi, ahamkara, and manas. Intellect, and intellect not in terms of academic intellect, but intellect in terms of being able to discern, discern the right information. So that would be what buddhi is. Ahamkara is loosely translated as ego, but again, I would not like to use the English word ego, but it's more of I amness, right? Like what I spoke about, I am, right? I identify things through ahamkara. This is my laptop, right? This is your laptop. So that's ahamkara's, what ahamkara is. And then you have manas, right? Now manas is like a processing unit. That's where all the external information through our sense organs comes in. It comes into the manas and it does all the sorting, that, oh, this is a rose, this is a pen, this is a cow, right? And all that information is processed by the manas. And these 3, your buddhi, ahamkara, manas, all these are what give us knowledge, right? But at a particular time, which of these is prominent is what will determine at what mental state I am. So if I am, let's say, if my manas is active, so I'm constantly just, looking at my senses. I'm, something which today the social media is, I think, really addressing, or, for the lack of better word, is the manas, right? It's engaging our senses, it's engaging our mind in that sense, right? And then when I see it and I'm like, oh, I don't have this, or this person has this, then it's the ahamkara. And buddhi would be like, you know what, social media is good, it's there for my entertainment, but I use it as per my discretion, right? So buddhi will actually be applicable if I'm able to keep my phone down and say, oh, you know what, I'm done with it, and I think I'm wasting more time, and it's no longer providing me entertainment. Or I say, okay, I will look at Facebook, or I'll look at Instagram for 10 minutes, and once those 10 minutes are done, I keep that down. So that is where the buddhi really plays a part in our day-to-day working, right? Now, very interestingly, Vyasa, gave these 5 types of mind that that we have, right? So the minds that he, 5 levels of mind or 5 types of mind is what Vyasa list is: Kshipta, right? Mudha, Vikshipta, Ekagrata, and Nirodha, right? Now, Kshipta is like a monkey mind. It is jumping from one thing to another thing to another. And so it's the instability in the mind. And you can also say, imagine it's a monkey and then it's drunk and then it's bitten by a scorpion. So what will happen to that monkey is, how the mind is like, hyperactive and, going all over the place, right? Mudha is where it's dull or lazy or stubborn, No, I know this and I'm going to stick with this. This is the right way. This is the only way. And unfortunately, I think the world today is really at that stage where we are so polarized, where we have a point of view and then we say, oh, this is the right point of view, and the others, what they're saying is wrong, right? Then there's Vikshipta. Vikshipta is, there it is oscillating. It is like, okay, I'm doing something and then, I kind of get distracted, but then I'm able to come back to what I was doing, right? So it is distracted, but there is an element of, let's say, focus available at that point in time. Ekagrata is where I am being able to focus, I am being able to concentrate, right? And I'm being able to sustain that for a decent amount of time. And the last is Nirodha. Nirodha is where there is a complete, it's like the focus is enveloped. I am completely focused. It is sustained for a long period of time. And probably it is at my will to keep that focus for as long as I want. And it is not relative to external, environments or external factors. And so yoga, the Lakshan Sutra, or like, what you would ask me, that what is really the objective of yoga is, the Sutra 2 of chapter 1. And so, right away, Patanjali says in the Lakshan Sutra is Yogaha Chitta Vritti Nirodha. And Nirodha is what the idea or what we are trying to do by practice of yoga. So chapter 1, Sutra 2, Patanjali says, Yogaha Chitta Vrittihi Nirodha. So the idea of yoga, the practice of yoga is, to stop the cessation or the fluctuation of mind or the chitta, right? And we just spoke about what chitta is, and Nirodha. So that is what the objective of yoga is to bring about a cessation of, the vrittis of the mind.
So these 5 types which you mentioned, 5 types or 5 stages or 5 states of mind, are they a gradation? For example, this is the best one and then second best is ekagrata, and is that how it's supposed to be understood?
It's, I don't know if it's given in terms of stages, but yes, of course, if you have a Shipta mind, then if you're like so hyperactive, it does cause a lot of suffering, exhaustion. I mean, imagine if you're, and which happens to us, right? At different times. Let's say when I have to prepare for this podcast, my mind is going, oh, I have to cover this, and so it's all over the place, right? Then if I'm able to bring in the ekagrata, so it need not actually follow all because it could be Shipta or it could be Mudha, where I'm like, no, this is what I'm going to talk about, and whatever Deepak asks me, I'll still answer the question in the way that I want to. Then that would be a Mudha mind, where I'm like being very obstinate, right? I think the idea is to be able to have ekagrata, right? To be able to focus for a sustained period of time in a daily householder, or in a corporate or as a student. I do need that ekagrata to be able to study well, to be able to sit for my exams, to be able to answer questions. And Nirodha, of course, is a stage where, which will, of course, happen only through the practice, that the 8 limbs of yoga that we spoke about, is how Nirodha happens. Okay, so Nirodha, very interestingly, is the Lakshan Sutra, or what Patanjali mentions as why we are doing yoga, right? So chapter 1 Sutra 2 itself, it says Chitta Vrittihi Nirodha. So the practice of yoga leads to the cessation of the vrittis, right? And so now we come to, the other thing that we spoke about, the vrittis. And so the vritti, again, it's vrittayaha panchatayaha klishtaha aklishtaha. So the vrittis are 5, as per the sutra, and they can be klishta or aklishta. So aklishta is, there is no coloring and it's not, bothering me. It just doesn't cause any kind of mental dissonance for me, and there's no suffering which is happening because of this, right? But the vrittis which are klishta, they will cause me suffering and will cause pain and dukkha that we earlier also spoke about. Now the five vrittis listed: pramana, viparyaya, vikalpa, nidra, smritaya. These are the 5 vrittis of the mind. So pramana is correct knowledge, correct understanding, the right knowledge. Viparyaya is the opposite of that, which is misapprehension or incorrect knowledge. Vikalpa is imagination. It could also be, known as or looked at as creativity, having a creative mind. Nidra is deep sleep. And this is a state of sleep which is not disturbed at all. And, which the Western science also refers to as deep sleep, the different sleep cycles. And the last is smriti, which is memory, recollection, right? So the vrittis, if they're conducive, they do not cause any kind of a dissonance for me. Then they can help me on whichever path I am. And of course, with reference to Yoga Sutra, it is on the path of the yogic journey. But even as an entrepreneur or as a student, these are things that help me. So the vrittis, if they do not come with a strong emotional reaction, right? And if I was to talk in the parlance of Yoga Sutra, it is the kleshas, then they are conducive for me. So for example, let's say, if I get to know I have, let's say during COVID, when we would get ourselves tested, and let's say if I see that, oh, I have COVID, and it does not cause fear, insecurity, panic in me, and I just see, oh, I have COVID, I need to go into isolation, I need to, drink a lot of fluids. So this is something which is conducive for me. It is helping me take the right action, right? Similarly, in terms of memory also, if I have a positive memory, which is reinforced, by another positive memory, then it kind of helps me carry on the path that I am on, even when I'm faced with difficulty. So for example, let's say a student has studied hard and gotten good grades or gotten appreciated for the good effort the person put in let's say a presentation. So that memory will help the students, when let's say the student is maybe after a couple of months feeling bored or does not want to study, that positive memory can help the student, right? But as I said, if these vrittis are accompanied by kleshas, and we will look at kleshas later, they will cause dissonance, they will cause some kind of suffering for me. Again, let's say the same thing as pramana. Let's say I have the result of my COVID and it instantly creates fear, insecurity for me that, oh my God, what's going to happen? Am I going to die? Am I going to live? Or let's say, who's going to take care of my children if I go into isolation or if I go into hospital? Then this is not a conducive vritti. It is causing me suffering, right? Memories, especially, right? If I have an associated bad memory with an action, and if I remember that memory, the bad memory, and it again brings in a lot of fear, anger, right? Jealousy, like the raga, dvesha that we talk about, right? Hatred or desire, then it is something that will, hamper me on my journey towards wherever I'm going. So these are the 5 vrittis, and as I said, they could be klishta or aklishta, klishta and klesha. So as I said, the klishta memory, the klishta vrittis kind of come in with the kleshas, so it's like a package. They come together, and that's why they're causing this suffering. And the the root word for both klishta and klesha is same. Something which is not conducive for me is what klishta or klesha both mean. So these are the vrittis that we kind of go through. Our mind is constantly moving from one to another.
And when you say, or when Patanjali says Chit Vritti Nirodha, uh, the reference is for Klishta Vrittis.
It is for the klishta vrittis, but when we study the text further, right, we also realize that actually nirodha is a stage where the mind is completely enveloped, right, and there are no vrittis which are happening, neither the positive nor the negative. And again, it's not positive or negative. As I said, the vritti is not affecting me, right? So even if the vritti exists, even if a memory comes, it does not cause any disturbance in my mind, and so my mind is like a clear lake. There are no ripples, there are no waves. So that's the state of mind, which we can probably conceive as the nirodha.
But how would you even know? I mean, in the precise moment, how would you even know whether this vrit? I mean, the definition of vritti is a movement of mind, and yes, mind is always moving. But in that precise moment, to understand whether this is good or bad, how would you recognize that?
So I'll again kind of read this thing is that it's not good or bad, because again that's, I feel,
Hmm.
very Western way of looking at things, and it's drilled into our verbiage and our vocabulary. So the vritti is either conducive for me, it's helping me, or it is holding me back,
Hmm.
right? So as I said, let's say I have to do this podcast. Let's say I've done previous talks, or I've given lectures, or I've spoken earlier. So I have the memory. So the memory comes back to me, oh, I did that. Now, when that memory comes back, if that memory comes back with a panic, with anxiety that, oh my God, it was so embarrassing, maybe somebody laughed at me, or somebody
Mhm.
came back after that session, and so if that memory that I recall from maybe all the 10 memories that I
Mhm.
have of public speaking, and I recall this memory, and then I say, you know what, Deepak, sorry, but I don't think I can do this podcast. So this is not conducive memory, right? But if I'm able to recall a memory, oh, I did this talk and there were people who came back to me and said, they really enjoyed it and they got something out of that talk. And I use that memory, to prepare and maybe come and have this talk with you. So then it's a conducive,
Right, but in the
vritti.
precise moment, uh, I mean, since your mind is in that movement, and maybe at a later stage, maybe you have taken a distance, then you can judge it and say, okay, this was a helpful or unhelpful vritti. But in that precise moment, you pretty much wouldn't be knowing. So, for example, we take the case of your COVID test, right?
Right.
And maybe it is serious enough for you to be panicking and rushing to an emergency room, and maybe it isn't, right? And you would probably have no in that precise moment, or right, just the force of emotional upheavals which the mind goes through, it would be almost impossible to understand whether it's a helpful or an unhelpful vritti. When we refer it to chit vritti nirodha, what I would understand again from different tradition is that you're saying that relieve your mind, your chitta of the vrittis, and at that stage, either you can look at it with equanimity, that everything is the same, or you are able to precisely judge it as unhelpful or helpful vritti and take your action going forward. But wouldn't it be very difficult at the precise moment when we are going? So, panic, for example, right? Almost every one of us knows that panicking has right, it has no rational or practical use. For example, we go on a stage and we have to speak to a large audience, and in our mind we know that yes, this is good for us, this is good for our career, everything is fine. Yet panic is an irrational force which can envelop everything we do. And even if logically in our mind we are saying right? There is no need to panic. Even yet, it can take over our entire being at that point. So, in the context of defining all these vrittis as klishta or aklishta, uh, is this ability to judge them or to accurately discern them, is that something which comes from this eight limbs and going through the stages, and then it gradually we become better at recognizing, or is that something else?
Right. So it's very interesting that, as I said, that the second sutra, Patanjali has listed that this
Hmm.
is, but then I think, Lakshan Sutra, as I said, that was part of, is part of all the text, and they try to bring in the Lakshan Sutra earlier on in the text. But of course, throughout the text, Patanjali gives different, options,
Yeah.
methods that one can try out. And I think that's why we say yoga is customized, because it's not one shoe fits all, right? So to answer your question, you're absolutely right, and I don't think that's the objective for a common person to at that point learn or discern that, oh, this is klishta or a klishta vritti. uh, this is just more to know that, oh, there are vrittis,
Hmm.
this is how my mind works. And I think that's where my fascination for Yoga Sutra is, because it talks about the mind. It tells me how the mind works, what is going on in the mind and how it gets disturbed, right? So I don't think that's the objective. And you're absolutely right that it's not easy at that moment. And therefore, of course, not with relation to vritti, but one of the things, that is mentioned in the niyama is swadhyay,
Hmm.
right? Which can be, directly understood as self-study, but I look at it as self introspection, right? So at a later stage, to go inwards and, look at it and say, oh, this is what happened at that time, right? What was happening, and ask myself those questions that, oh, what was happening? What came up for me when I remembered this, right? Can I maybe look at a positive memory instead of, a memory which is creating so much of panic for me? Or
Hmm.
let's say when you said, COVID, the first reaction may be panic, and that's not bad, right? Like, fear is not bad.
Yeah.
Fear is why you and I are here today. It has helped us to survive all those years we were in the jungles, and even today it helps us to survive, right? So we cannot say that, and that's why I said that it's not good or bad. It's important, right? But it's equally important to reflect on these things. And the Yoga Sutra also says that when do you do the reflection? It says you cannot do the reflection when the kleshas are udara. Udara is at a like erupted state.
Hmm.
At that time you cannot sit and say, oh, I'm going to meditate now. That's not going to happen. You do the reflection when you are at a quieter time, quieter place, quieter frame of mind, and then reflect on these. And that is the way out. So swadhyay, if I was to say, is the way to do it. And to do it at a time where you are not agitated, where you are not within the grips of very strong kleshas or emotions. So that itself is prescribed by Patanjali, much later in the text. And if I was to come back, and maybe that would be your question, is that what is the way out? How does one kind of, you know, stop these vrittis? It's a practice. It's an evolving practice, and this is not, while the objective is listed right up front, the idea is not that you start from there. You'll have to kind of, start from where you are, or maybe ground zero.
Hmm.
So the sutra in chapter 111 itself, sutra 1, chapter 1, sutra 12, Patanjali says, Abhyasa Vairagya Bhyam Tannirodha. So it is Abhyas and Vairagya which leads to the, cessation of these vrittis. Um, Abhyasa, how, I mean, of course, if I was to look at this text, because as I said, we have to look at it in the context of, maybe 1,500 years back when it was written. The physical practice, of course, was assumed that already exists, and the person is already on the path of the yogic journey. Uh, but if I was to look at it, today's Abhyas is practice, right? Uh, and further ahead in the text, Patanjali also says, that it has to be a continuous practice or effort. It cannot be a one-time effort, right? So abhyasa is appropriate effort, if I was to say, right? What is the right amount, right intensity of the effort? Put in that effort. And vairagya again is a very loaded word, if I was to say it, and people look at vairagya saying, oh, I denounce everything and, I kind of go to the jungles. But vairagya, I would say, is non-attachment. So you're putting in the effort, but don't be attached to the effort. That, oh, I am doing a yoga practice, and I'm going to lose 20 kgs of weight after this, or 10 kgs of weight, or I'm going to be super flexible. I would say maybe not. Maybe do it because, you're doing it. You're putting in the effort of, let's say, an asana practice, and see where it takes you. It may result in weight loss. It may result in flexibility. It may result in strengthening, but don't get stuck on the result. Is what I feel that, this sutra is talking about. And as I said, it is a continuous journey. Yoga is not a destination. And that is again what I find liberating about the text is that it says that you have to keep moving, you have to keep coming back to it and keep practicing again and again. And that is it's a journey, not a destination.
Yeah, and so we didn't talk about kleshas, and I think we will probably have to do it in the next session. But as we wrap up, Anubha, a couple of questions are coming into my mind, and they're more on the practical aspect. So first is that almost everything which we discussed, the vrittis, the movements, the suffering, is inherently individual, right? It is happening in my mind.
Right.
What if the problem lies in you, right? Or what if the problem lies in my neighbor, right? Where does this fit into the real world? So, right, you go on the road and somebody has banged your car. There's a road rage issue, and there are tens of thousands of instances which happen every day. What would you recommend as a teacher? And I mean, what would be your outlook on this completely external driven causes of suffering or unhappiness? And so again, we can turn it completely inward and say, okay, yeah, maybe somebody's honking at you, or maybe somebody's doing something, but you are allowing your mind to move in that direction to suffer. So that is one aspect of it. But there is also, I would assume, an inherently external aspect, which we see. And even if we don't go to extremely drastic scenarios of war or terrorism attacks or that, even in our daily lives, we face situations which are, I mean, objectively, without getting flooded by emotions, you can say, okay, this is some other person's fault. How would you look at that, and how would yoga look at that?
How I would look at it, I'll probably come to it, but I think I feel that the answer to this question, if I was to look at yoga and the Yoga Sutra specifically, is where Patanjali talks about, Pratipaksha Bhavanam. So Sutra talks about Pratipaksha Bhavanam is to develop or cultivate kind of an opposing view. So let's say when you are feeling angry, right? Can I bring in maybe a component of compassion, right? When I'm feeling hatred, can I maybe, I won't say, go to the other extreme and, love thy neighbor if your neighbor is a very obnoxious person, right? But can we maybe bring in a little compassion for the person that, oh, maybe that person is suffering too, because what I have studied and what I am realizing in my life, in my personal experience as well, in my journey, is that I think essentially all of us are suffering. A person who is raging on the road is probably upset with something which has happened to him, or, is happening to him, and then he's finding some outlet and it's coming out somewhere else, right? And the world that we're living in, as I said. So the text, of course, talks about these concepts in terms of Pratipaksh Bhavanam and, developing an attitude of compassion, friendliness, right? But if I, as you rightly said, that a lot of times, it's not possible and we have to be practical, right? And I feel that yoga is a very practical, and therefore it is not prescriptive. It does not prescribe that you have to do X, Y, Z. It gives you different options. It is a practice. So you apply it one day, it doesn't work, then you come back again to it, apply it again. So it is something that you cultivate, inculcate. So let's say, for example, compassion. It may not be possible for me today. I am not at that stage of compassion. And let's say maybe I yelled at my neighbor was being obnoxious and I yelled back at my neighbor. Can I go back and maybe when I'm a little calmer, just reflect on what I did, my actions? And I would say just see that what those actions did for you. Forget about the neighbor, Did those actions cause me further anguish? If it was a release, I will say, good job. If it actually helped you release a pent up frustration, good job. Maybe it's done something good for you, so you can do something good for your neighbor and say, you know what, I'm sorry I yelled at you, maybe I should not. Or if it caused more anger, angst, irritation for you, then maybe just reflect that where is this coming? Is it really about the neighbor, right?
Yeah.
Maybe it's something else which is bothering you, which, again, the neighbor was just, a catalyst for that. So it's not easy, Deepak. And as I said, it's not going to happen overnight. This is something which takes time and we need to invest. I personally believe that I think we need to invest that time and energy for ourselves, especially in the world that we're living in today.
Yeah, no, I actually like that. I mean, maybe hugging your neighbor is not the solution. Maybe right throwing a stone at his window is also not the solution. Probably solution lies somewhere midway, and where that solution is probably comes back to you, right? The two words abhyas and vairagya, and right, where do you fit into the practice? What kind of practice is giving you the most benefit? And I think this is why this right the vivek and vairagya, right, these two terms figure quite prominently in almost every tradition, because unless you're able to discern what is good, what is bad, what is right, what is true, what is false, and you're able to then detach yourself, without these two prerequisites, almost all of our life is simply flowing through with right with these vrittis or with these emotions, and we are just a passenger in a pretty fast moving river. And yeah, no, I think that is probably the answer to most things. It's probably it's not black and white, as you said. It is highly individual, especially if we have to live and succeed in this, in whatever definition of success one might choose. We have to discern, we have to be able to detach, and we have to be able to practice, because it will not happen in a single day. Before we end, Anubha, I mean, again, since a large part of this discussion has been philosophical, right? There are terms, and then there are sub-terms, and then there are meanings. And now, you mentioned that perhaps when this structure was laid out, there was an anticipation or expectation that the student is already qualified to understand this stuff. But for most of today's generation, everything is new. So what benefit would it be, I mean, for a practitioner, what benefits do you see in actually right studying these philosophical terms rather than jumping straight to your asanas or physical practice or dhyana? What practical and what short-term and long-term benefit do you see when you prescribe people to at least run, for example, Sankhya you mentioned, right? Why would I learn Sankhya and really understand these terms? What is there for me?
Right. So I'll just kind of slightly correct what you said in terms of the presupposition that the person is already aware. See, we've always had a guru shishya parampara, right? So there is always that assumption that there is a teacher, and the student is either studying with the teacher, and and that's how I've learned this text, right? The first time I picked it up on my own and tried to read it, it didn't really make sense to me, and I could not really grasp a lot of what was being said. So the Guru Shishya Parampara, therefore, is of course important, relevant, and was again something that existed, years back. I think the presumption is that the person is willing to move towards that yogic journey. And therefore, like for me personally, the Yoga Sutra is philosophical, but it's also psychological, right? Because as I said, it talks about the mind, it talks about, the vrittis, the kleshas, the disturbances, and which we'll probably, cover in our next session in detail, right? So, again, I don't know. I don't normally, again, like to be prescriptive, because as I said, the text is not prescriptive. My lineage is not prescriptive. What I have learned from my teachers, it's never prescribed. It's always like, this is what is there. You pick and choose what you like, and take it and make it your own, right? But yes, what I would say is that, as I said, that somebody who's interested in metaphysics, then Sankhya, yes, because it's a very metaphysical text. Very interesting in terms of creation, the evolutes, how the evolution happens, right? So Sankhya, deals with a lot of that, and it lays down the psychology, the philosophy for yoga. And yoga, I would say, while it's philosophical, uh, there is an element of psychology, because it talks, as I said, of the mind and how we react, and maybe what are the options available for us. How do we deal with these different things. What it also very beautifully lays, that even if a person, if I am on my yogic journey, it says that you will face these challenges, because it is human. It is very human that even, let's say, I am doing yama niyama, I may have a bad day, because it presupposes that each moment is a new moment, right? In a way that, I mean, I'm not the same every day, right? I may have different factors playing on my mind, and I may feel that I have overcome, my kleshas or my vrittis, but something may just happen and derail me. And then Patanjali says, it's okay, hang in there, come back, it will happen. So it actually, in that sense, it actually lays that out for a practitioner, that, what, you are going to face challenges. These are the challenges you will face. And maybe you can look at 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 options and pick and choose whatever works for you at that stage and at that time, and take it up. So I would say that, maybe if somebody who's interested in understanding the mind, and as I said, it's not necessarily somebody who's on the yogic journey, but as I said, on any path that you face these challenges, right? Because the mind is the mind, and it plays the game that it plays, right? So it kind of gives you those options that you can practice. But I would so I would say that somebody who's interested, it would help them to understand, or somebody who's already a yoga practitioner, without having the knowledge of Yoga Sutra, I would say that that's okay. You can, I think you should like just come back to the text, because it'll actually make your practice all that much stronger.
Perfect. Well, Anubha, this has been a wonderful session. Thank you for coming on board. And again, we have a fair few segments to cover. And I would love to, in the next session, obviously we'll talk about kleshas, but eventually I would move to, I'd like to have a session which is precisely the practical aspect of what we are mentioning. And if somebody was to get started today, how would you as a teacher take their first session? But all of that is in the future. Again, thank you so much for coming and taking your time and explaining all these concepts. Lovely to have you here, and hope to see you again sometime.
Thank you so much, Deepak, and it was a great interaction with you. And thank you for having me over.